It's 6:03. I know we still have some folks who've registered that are trying to get in, but I just want to kind of kick some things off, and then I'm sure we will, more folks will come in. Just as an agenda, so you know, I'll kind of set the table for what we're going to be covering tonight, introduce myself and some other members of my team who are on the call. As we so often do, we're so happy to be joined by Councilman Kelly right now, and I know Councilman Brancatelli is trying to log in as he gets back home. And then we have a presentation to give to all of you on what's been going on with our project. So that presentation is 18 slides. If you take out the title slide and the contact slide, that's 16 real slides. I hope to do that in 15 to 20 minutes. So you're gonna have to, unfortunately, bear with me talking for 15 to 20 minutes.
1099 tax form from ODJFS for jobless benefits they didn't file for.
Tony, you're a little loud right now.
Sorry about that.
It's all good. So we'll get through that and then open the floor for question and answer. So let me just reintroduce myself for those of you who I have not had the chance to meet, although I love seeing so many names and faces that I know and love, and it's wonderful to be with all of you tonight. I am Jeff Foresby. I'm the Executive Director of Old Brooklyn Community Development Corporation, and a couple other members of my team that are on tonight. Lucas Reeve is our Director of Neighborhood Development and has been intimately involved with this project. Hope Fierro is our Community Health Coordinator. Jamie Lucas Bauer is our Neighborhood Development Coordinator. Many of you know Jamie as the talented extraordinaire of all things Old Brooklyn. And Amber Jones, I believe, is on the call as well as our Director of Community Health. We've got fantastic board members on this call. We've got former board members on this call. We've got awesome volunteers. We've got founders of amazing organizations. I'm grateful for all of you to be here tonight and looking forward to what we're going to be sharing with you. But first, before we get into that presentation, just give Councilman Brancatelli and Councilman Kelly an opportunity to share any remarks to set the table.
Thank you. First and foremost, Director, I want to thank you for putting this together and really engaging so many people in this process. But more importantly, I want to thank the organization for taking the risk. As having sat in your seat before, taking on real estate challenges like this are always a stress for both the staff and the board members who need to step out of what is simply a comfort zone of doing easy deals to doing the very hard transactions that are going to be game changers for our community. So thanks for taking the risk, taking this on, and being so engaging with our community. Thank you, Director.
Mm-hmm. Kevin? Anything?
Thank you, Jeff. And thanks everybody for calling in tonight and spending a few minutes. And as Tony indicated, this is not an easy project. And this is a big decision. St. Luke's is not just a building. It represents a lot more than that to the history of Old Brooklyn, to the people that have worshiped there, that are a part of it. There have been schools that have been operated out of there, and it's just really a big part of the community. But so that is why we need to take this so seriously. But I really think that if we look at the direction the community is going, what are the needs that we have? What are the real estate needs that we have? And you look at the success that we've had with the building that we purchased recently. There's now a headquarters for Old Brooklyn Community Development Corporation, 6 city cycles, and is a viable real estate opportunity for people. We need to do better site control of our real estate assets. We need to have we need to control real estate so that we can execute the plan that Old Brooklyn has developed, our master plan. And we really have to take these decisions very seriously, very methodically, very thoughtfully. And the first step in doing that is to seek the input of those in the community and really listen to the people that will be affected by this. So while we're taking a few minutes out of our night, I think this is extremely important. I want to just thank everybody. I want to thank the CDC for putting this together and thank everybody for caring enough to spend a few minutes with us.
Thanks, Kevin. Just 2 more points of order as I'm about to start the presentation. Number 1, I ask that if you're not speaking during the question and answer period later, if you remain muted. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat if you're worried about not remembering them for later, and we'll come back to them. And also, I have as many of you know, I have 3 very little boys who are very loud. So that if they come in through the sound, please excuse them. This is their favorite hours of the day. So thank you. Thank you for that. All right, with that, Lucas, can you give me permission to share my screen, please?
You should be able to now.
Give it another chance.
Way to hold out on the boss.
I know, right? Made him the host, and this is how he pays me back.
Give it a shot now.
All right, here we go. So I'm going to walk through this PowerPoint. For those of you who've been on Zooms with me, I hate having to walk through PowerPoints on Zoom meetings, but this is the only way that we're going to be able to share all this information. So thank you for your patience. 4216 Pearl Road is the site of the abandoned St. Luke's Church. So many of you know it well. What we're going to talk about tonight are its existing conditions, our process in developing a master plan for it, and our recommendations moving forward. First of all, I want to thank the Architecture Office, who was our partner in developing this master plan. A couple of the folks from Architecture Office are on this call. Did exceptional research into the property, into properties like it, and into what we can do. And there's a couple of historic photos that I just think are tremendous. The one in the top left shows the former St. Luke's Church with a different bell tower. That's fascinating. That top left photo also shows the original Pearl Road United Methodist Church. That is before the 1925 school annex building on the north side of the St. Luke's Church. And that is when you can see in that bottom center photo, the original Pearl Road United Methodist Church that later became a used car lot in the bottom right, and is now the wonderful green space where we host the farmers market and many other community events in partnership with Pastor Rife. So just some very fascinating historical context for us all just to be aware of. The site didn't always look as the way it did. And it's wonderful to kind of understand that layering and that history. So the church was abandoned immediately after the Easter services in 2014. I have notes that connected us with the real estate broker for the United Church of Christ as early as September of 2014, asking to walk through the property to begin redevelopment. The property at that point was listed on the market for well over $300,000. We probably toured about 36 different parties through the building, and you can see some of the types of developers and users that we toured through the building, and the challenges were identified as you could imagine. There is no site access. The property is bounded by other properties and does not have access off of Pearl Road. To even bring in a bucket to start doing some painting and cleaning, you have to walk through someone else's property, which is obviously a challenge. The building was built well before the Americans with Disabilities Act and all the accommodations that we now build into buildings and facilities, which are going to be a major challenge. There is no poured foundation underneath the sanctuary. The sanctuary walls go into the dirt floor. Above the dirt floor, there's a couple-inch air gap, and then there's a wood floor. So there's no foundation. So if you wanted to put in a bar or a restaurant or even probably bar or restaurant or any sort of retail use like that, the weight load on the floor could cause significant challenges for the building. And then in addition, the sanctuary floor is sloped. If you've not been in the building, the floor is built on a slope going towards the altar. It's a beautiful worship space, but that makes it a challenge for, again, a lot of reuses, because most folks that want to run a business don't want their floor on a 15-degree angle. So none of those folks were able to make it work. We even had one group that had the property under purchase agreement for less than $100,000, and we had helped them secure a $70,000 grant to assist with that. They were going to be able to self-perform probably 50% of the work in the building, and they still couldn't make it work. It was very frustrating and very challenging. And yet the price still remained north of $300,000. Very sadly, the utilities were turned off over 4 years ago now. All of us are Clevelanders. We know it happens to vacant buildings without utilities on them through a summer and a winter in Cleveland, much less 4 of them. And that began the rapid deterioration of the facilities that we'll get into. And then the St. Luke's Church came into OBCDC's possession in January of 2020. In the fall of 2019, the United Church of Christ approached us about donating the property. They needed to dispose of the property and dispose of it quickly based off its conditions and the financial burden for them. And so through in partnership with the Cuyahoga County Land Bank, the property was donated to the land bank, and we have signed an agreement to take possession of the property from the land bank. If you go to the county's website right now, you'll see that the property is still owned by the land bank because our delayed period in which we take ownership doesn't go into effect until next January. Lastly, because this is relevant to this conversation, we've focused most of our work over the last 9 months on the St. Luke's Church and the Pearl Road United Methodist Church behind it, which we'll get into. However, within the last 3 weeks, Old Brooklyn CDC did sign a purchase agreement for the adjacent property at the corner of Memphis and Pearl, the property that's 3426 Memphis, what we all know as the Green Line building. And that is a very recent update that does impact this, but I'm giving you all that information so you know, but the preponderance of the research and our work has been not including that property over the last 9 months. So here's just some other existing conditions. As I mentioned, we took possession of the building in January of 2020 after we had been contacted the prior fall to begin that process. So just some overview. I'm not sharing the entirety of the master plan, but just some reminder of what we're looking at. You can see the various green spaces that exist in and around these properties, as well as the buildings that exist in and around the properties. Obviously, there are plenty of other buildings. These are really the only things that we're talking about under consideration because they're either properties that OBCDC now has under its control or partner properties in which we're closely aligning our efforts, such as with the Pearl Road United Methodist Church, which is the beautiful church that sits back off of Pearl Road. So when we went into this process over the last year, we had 3 goals. Number 1, secure the property. Number 2, evaluate the conditions of the property. And number 3, envision a future for that property. And I'm going to get into each of these details. There were some concerns. The building was not secure and was vacant. What happens when you have an open vacant building, some things happen inside of it and to it that we wanted to address. Obviously, we wanted to understand the structural integrity of the building. How tight is the building? Are there water leaks? What's the condition of the systems? All of those pieces were evaluated in our master plan with the architecture office. And then we wanted to imagine, what can we do? What can we do if we just have the St. Luke's Church? What do we do if we're able to partner with the Pearl Road United Methodist Church behind it? And then now very recently, what could we do if we include the Green Line building at 3426 Memphis? But that's a very recent addition. And I want to quick pause here and explain why from day one, Pearl Road United Methodist Church was a part of this conversation. And it's largely for 3 reasons. Number 1, the roots of Old Brooklyn Community Development Corporation are in supporting the institutions of the neighborhood, in particular our faith-based institutions. When we were founded in 1974, our code of regulations still say to this day, we can only exist when we have residents, businesses, and institutions at the table. Unfortunately, as so many of us know, we've had a continued loss of faith-based institutions within Cleveland and within Old Brooklyn that are painful every time that happens. For over 200 years, there have been faith-based institutions on this corner, which is really, really special to have on your neighborhood's main street. Not many main streets have healthy, vibrant faith communities as a part of their daily life. And we do, and we're proud of that. And yet we know from our relationship that we've developed with Pastor Reif and his congregation over the last few years at PRUMC, the operations of that facility are challenging. It's a large building. It's an old building. It has major needs. And with the congregation's current ability, there are questions about PRUMC's, viability. If you look on a map, There are not many United Methodist Church of Christ anywhere between downtown and the far suburbs. And so anything we can do to help out Pastor Reif and the community at PRUMC was tantamount to our work from step one. So I want to talk first about the conditions of the property. You'll see some photos, some obvious challenges when you walk by the building on the outside, and then some of the less obvious things from the inside. You can see a photo of the sanctuary in the bottom left and some major water damage along the wall, and particularly in the corner of the building, indicating a water leak and an unhealthy envelope for the building. We engaged with the Sacred Landmarks Initiative of the Cleveland Restoration Society. This is probably the most expertise body on historic preservation of sacred structures within Northeast Ohio. And so they had 3 different members of their group go through the building. One looked at just the masonry, one looked at the structure, kind of the carpentry, if you will, and then one looked at the mechanical systems. They rated the building as being in poor condition. You can see some of these things. I won't read them there, but these were the stuff we identified as challenges. But to hear it from this group of historic preservationists was pretty sobering. So that was a key first step within our process. So we secured the building. OBCDC invested well over $10,000 in securing the building. Doors, locks, we covered all the windows in plexiglass to preserve what is there, tightened up the building, stopped any active leaks. We assessed the conditions, which, as you just saw, were not good. The good news about them, and this gets to question number 1 on this slide, is preservation feasible? Yes, and thank goodness we are at that point. So that is great. The third piece, in which we probably spent the most time over the last 6 months, is what does the future look like? Can we save the church? What could be built in it? What could be built in part of it? And then kind of what are the economics of restoring it, of raising part of it, of having to rebuild on the whole site, and then having deep conversations with our partners at Pearl Road United Methodist Church. I can't say enough about Pastor Reif and the work he's doing, the trustees at that church, and one in particular, Tom Heitz, who has kept that building together with shoestring and dental floss, and he is a gift to this neighborhood, and we're so grateful that Tom's done such a great job with that. And so having conversations with the church about keeping worshiping at this corner, which is very important, easing the financial burden that they have, keeping the community gathering spaces. We've loved having that green space right in the center of the neighborhood for our community events, and then bringing life to Pearl Road right there in the neighborhood. So that's kind of our thought process for developing a master plan. And with that, we came to functionally 4 different scenarios that we want to share with you tonight and have a discussion with about what a future could look like on the site. We looked at 70, 80 different options. If there's an option you could think of, we looked at it. Let's keep all the buildings. Let's keep none of the buildings. Let's keep some of the buildings. Let's put in a parking garage. Let's put in something below deck. Let's put in a community garden. Let's put in greenhouses. Let's put in performing arts venue. All of the options we looked at. And so I'm just sharing you this screenshot to show you some of the options. These are not all the options we're obviously finally considering, but just to show you some of the ideas that we looked at. When we looked at these options, again, let me remind you, we wanted to look at how feasible these scenarios could be. How likely would it be that businesses would go into these spaces? Can we address the challenge of the building is not accessible from Pearl Road? How financially feasible is the project? And then, as I mentioned earlier, those same questions with Pearl Road United Methodist Church. They were center to every part of our conversation because we want them to thrive for another 200 years on this corner as they've been there for 200 years. So first scenario, preservation of all the structures. This is the most straightforward option. This is a beautiful option. It maintains all of the primary structures. we would be able to restore the church as we previously identified, reinvest in the Green Line building, and kind of keep the buildings as they are. One area that has been identified by preservationist architects would be the necessary ramping that would be needed to meet ADA requirements could dramatically alter the Pearl Road facade of the St. Luke's Church. And that's something to be aware of. Within the St. Luke's building, we could get 2 or 3 new businesses likely if we were to restore that complex. And then the challenge that comes with this scenario is that OBCDC would probably need to raise $3 million out of a $6 million project, which is obviously a very significant undertaking to evaluate. But that is one scenario. There's sometimes some questions come up about, well, what's inside the building? It's the building. Here you can see the floor plans and the kind of what the uses are within each one. The sanctuary itself is about 7,000. The sanctuary itself is probably about 6,000 square feet or so. That's the sloped area, and then you have what we call the education annex, which is the northern half of the building, which is about 3,500 square feet or so, and that's 2 floors of that. So you can understand that. The basement is not usable right now, and is likely not, would be very challenged to be used. I mentioned the lack of the foundation before. Because the lack of the foundation and the utilities have not been gone, I've actually had a staff member fall through the floor in the basement because the conditions are so bad, and there's very significant black mold throughout the basement as well. A second scenario that we want to look at is preservation of the existing buildings, combined with an accessibility solution for PRUMC. PRUMC does not have a good elevator. We would need an elevator for St. Luke's Church. So what if we were to preserve the buildings but install an elevator that connects the 2 buildings? It's a really neat solution that was incredibly creative, that allows us to kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Unfortunately, it still kind of keeps the same challenges that we identified before. We'd likely still have to do the ramping along Pearl Road, altering the facade of the building, and the significant financial gap for the project remains. It's a great solution to address the ADA issues, but does not address the economic issues within the first scenario. So the next 2 scenarios are far more severe, and I want to tell you that as we get into them. Scenario 1 could be that it's a mixture of preservation and new construction. You can see in this scenario we maintain the St. Luke's Church. We maintain at least the facade, if not much of the Green Line building. We maintain the Pearl Road United Methodist Church. But I want to explain a few things that you'll see in here. You'll see that the Pearl Road United Methodist Church is partially in red and partially in orange. The parts that in red would be a newly rehabilitated home for the Pearl Road United Methodist Church. As the congregation has shared with us, the current building is too big for the needs of their congregation and their ability to maintain it. Shrinking down to a smaller percentage of the structure while still maintaining the green space in front of them, as well as still maintain the visibility to Pearl Road, could be an ideal scenario for them to continue to worship on the site, to alleviate some of the burden of the building, but keep their strong community vitality and community connectivity on the site. What you see in orange throughout most of the project would be a residential conversion. Some of that you can see is a residential conversion of the historic structure within the St. Luke's Church. Some of that is new construction behind, perhaps above the Green Line building, and then potentially a part of the education annex of the St. Luke's Church. It also keeps and actually reinvigorates a little bit more green space in between the Green Line building and the St. Luke's Church through a nifty little courtyard that could be programmed by OBCDC and other community partners, as well as it keeps the community green space in front of PRUMC. Some wonderful, exciting options about this. You can see the economic impact is much more significant. We get a couple new businesses. Very critically, we would get dozens of new apartments within to the neighborhood, which those apartment users are the folks that shop at Six City Cycles and Coffee and Irie Jamaican Kitchen, keeping those businesses alive and thriving. So that is obviously always a key consideration for us. The other kind of piece about this is that the amount of subsidy that would be needed for this project would likely still be the same. And that's the part of the subsidy that would have to go into saving the St. Luke's Church. However, as a percentage basis, $3 million is still a lot of money to raise as subsidy for a project. But if you're raising $3 million for a $25 or a $30 million project, I'm not saying it's a home run, but it is something that's relatively feasible compared with raising $3 million on a $6 million project. So that's one scenario. And then the fourth scenario would be one in which we would seek a larger redevelopment and we'd have to face the unfortunate consequence of demolition at that point. So you see in this scenario, again, the red component is the Pearl Road United Methodist Church, shrunk down into a larger portion of their existing footprint as in the previous scenario. Much of the rest of their building is then converted into housing. And then you can see that most of the rest of the corner is wrapped in new construction with retail below and housing above. You can see in this scenario, we would have more new businesses and more apartments. And because the lack of a need to kind of subsidize the church restoration, that would be a project that likely would not require any extraneous subsidy by OBCDC for a project in probably a $25 to $30 million range. So I have been talking a ton. I want a quick walk through where we are. And then please, I want to stop and have a dialogue. Thank you all for listening. I want to hear feedback tonight. We've taken this through OBCDC's real estate committee and finance committee and board. We've taken it through a small community stakeholders group. We've taken it to individually to some longtime property owners and leaders within the neighborhood. This was our first chance, because this is such a new process, to share the larger ideas with the community and get feedback. At that point, we will continue to deepen our partnership exploration with Pearl Road United Methodist Church, our most critical partner in this project, pursue adopting our master plan, which includes all of these scenarios with the city of Cleveland, and then go out and seek developers for options from historic preservation to new construction and everything in between. There's a lot of interest in being in Old Brooklyn right now. We have a lot of great folks. I want to publicly thank John Young, who connected us with some terrific folks down at Greater Cleveland Partnership and Cleveland Development Advisors, who've already connected us with some of the kind of most prolific historic preservationists in Cleveland. So that is what we're going to spend the next 6 to 9 months doing. But for now, here's our contact information. You guys know how to get a hold of us. I'm going to stop sharing so that I can see all of your faces. That's great. And open questions. Before we get to questions, I do want to give Pastor Reif from PRUMC a chance to share some comments on behalf of his congregation.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks to everybody for being here. I also have little ones, so if there's background noise, I also crave your indulgence. And also for the cat, although he's pretty quiet. It's wonderful for you to have all of you here, to know that you're invested in Old Brooklyn and in what happens on this corner. I just wanted to say, first off, thanks to Old Brooklyn CDC for spearheading all of this, keeping us in the loop, listening to our feedback. And so I just want to say it's been a great process so far working with Jeff and the crew over there. So we are at Pearl Road examining these plans as well. As Jeff said, we were interested in right sizing our building. Traditionally, we have shared our space. We've usually operated in half or a third of the building, sharing spaces with the Head Start program or with other organizations over the many years. So this for us is looking at reorienting that shared space. Instead of being horizontal to being vertical. And so for our next steps, my church members and I are going to be talking to representatives. There's the cat again. Representatives from, yeah, he had to chime in. He heard we were talking about him. But we'll be talking to Adam and Ethan at the architecture office. They're going to do a survey of our building. They're going to talk to some members of the church about what our needs are and help us come up with some potential rough idea of what those floor plans might look like, so we can decide if we can exist and be church in that particular portion of the building. So I just want to let you all know that we are being consulted and that we are doing our own due diligence on this. And it's an exciting process to think about what our future can be and to have a long-term future. I keep telling the folks at Pearl, just a couple of years ago, we celebrated our bicentennial, and this is the plan to get to the tricentennial. So we're working on that one. So thanks again to Jeff and Lucas and everybody.
Yeah, you know I have bigger plans than just tricentennial. You've been there for 200. You've got to do another 200, Arlen. That's how it works. So with that, happy to entertain questions. You can put them in the chat. If you want to raise your hand or just unmute yourself, we will do our best to go from there. FD.
Hi.
Great to see you.
Good to see you. I have a bunch of questions, but the one question is, you talk about the Green Line. Is that the Booth Corner Point building are we talking about?
Yeah, so we refer to it internally as the Green Line building because there's a little sign on the back of it.
Oh, okay.
That says Green Line. Corner Point, I've heard it called the Flower Shop building.
Okay, I call it Flower Basket. But
Yeah.
Is it up for sale, or, how's that going?
As I mentioned, OBCDC has it under contract for purchase agreement. We signed that purchase agreement with Randy Blake, the current owner, although we are purchasing from him about 3 weeks ago.
Okay, good. And then also that house that's in the back, I would think that if that house itself were taken down and the parking lot were given access, I mean, this is on the minimal basis, doing the least amount of work. If you knocked down that house and took down the fencing, you would get total access to the church, I'm assuming. Is that?
That is a correct assumption. We weren't able to make that assumption until we had the Green Line building under purchase agreement.
Okay.
Knock down a house.
Okay.
But there is currently a business that has a lease for that house. And we don't want to entertain any of those conversations until we complete the transaction and engage with all the businesses within the building.
Okay. And I just want to put in that I think with all of the growth that we see in Tremont, Ohio City, and West 65th and Detroit, I would think that there's such protocol or a basis that we can build on, because if you go there on Detroit Road and you go to Hingetown, I mean, the buildings have been exploding for residential. And I would hate to see St. Luke's come down. I mean, personally, it would bring tears to my eyes. I mean, I would just be, in the best case scenario, I would love and always wanted to do this even on my own, was put in a community center. I don't know how viable that is, but I just think there's such a need for so many things in the community and you cannot ignore them. And so I see that as critical. Leaving it there and hopefully maybe doing it as a community center, whether you're going to have daycare and you're going to just services for people, teach women how to cook and men, and child services and teaching them how to, eat things that are the tricks to raise children. I mean, I'm passionate about these things and it just brings me to tears to think that there is no real place that is doing this community service. And I see the need because I have my business in the neighborhood and they knock on my door and people are in need. And to ignore that is just, it's just cold and it's just not possible. So, but I do believe that getting in residential service buildings, apartments, to me, that's just number, maybe two. But I mean, again, going into Hingetown, going to all those areas where they built and built and built, the need is there. And especially if you want young people in that are willing to, you can even sell condos, but I mean, rent, I'm passionate about that.
FD, thank you. And also thank you for making some of the best cakes known to this.
You're welcome.
I also want to say, what you were saying was music to my ears about serving the community. And I think that aligns a lot with our partnership with Pastor Reif. It's something that he feels very strongly about how we can better configure that church and that congregation for a lot of that community space. It's something that his congregation is very passionate about, that the current building doesn't allow them to do either. And so I think there's definitely some synergy there. So thank you, FD.
Okay.
Hey, John.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for the presentation, Jeff. Appreciate all the time you've put into this. You know, I got to say that I'm really strong believer in preserving that church. It's such a beautiful structure. And I think that you, the CDC, we, the community, have an opportunity to take that structure and make something unique out of it. And when you look at business districts that are competing with other business districts, for those of you that don't know me, I own a business right down the street on Pearl Road. And we talk about rebuilding a business district. You need businesses that feed off each other. You need businesses that have walking traffic and one store that attracts businesses to another store. And we have a unique building like the church coming up with and trying to find that business that would be, you know, that could move into that space. I know there's challenges. I know the floor is shifted and the ceiling the roof is dripping, but there's people out there, there's investors out there that can turn that building into something that would enhance our business community. And when I look at, you know, what has happened to Pearl Road in the past, and I know a lot of the people on this call have been here for a while, in Old Brooklyn, in the 80s, they told us that if we tore down that ugly theater, we'd get this great, beautiful office building in its place. And now we have a Dollar General. When they tore down the restaurant, and now we have a CVS, you know, those are the things that just keep knocking teeth out of Main Street. And so I guess I'm asking you to explore every single option you can to figure out how we can preserve that part of Old Brooklyn and how we can find, you know, and I hear what everybody's saying. It's a great spot for housing, but when you want to build Main Street, you need business, you need economic activity, and you need to get all of that feeding off each other to make that strong business community. And in my opinion, that's what would make Old Brooklyn stand out from another business district somewhere else. If we can rely on you, the CDC, to help us get those businesses in that place, in that unique building.
Thanks, John. I've shared with you, and many of you know, I'm a historic preservationist at heart. And I am contrary to the way I behave sometimes, I am a man of faith and who loves my church. And so we will do everything we can within reason. Within reason is going to be the hard thing, and that's where we're going to have a lot of this conversation over the next year. Councilman Kelly, you raise your hand.
Yes, please. I know this has been discussed, and this has probably been answered, but I forget. Whatever option that is the community decides upon, does OBCDC intend to maintain ownership of the footprint going forward? Do those options that contemplate an ongoing relationship with the church, will they pay us a fee as a tenant, like a lease, or what are we looking at going forward? Would that be like a lease arrangement?
Yeah, leave it to the lawyer to ask the question about a lease arrangement. So we intend to be involved in the ownership chain. And I think that's one thing that OBCDC in its current iteration is able to do that is notably different from the organization in years past. Thanks to the leadership of generations that have come before us, OBCDC is a very strong organization with a healthy amount of staff and strong financial capacity. So we can pursue these projects without a lot of financial fear in that sense. The cost of acquisition for the church is nominal. Acquisition for the Green Line building is reasonable for what we're trying to do. And so at the very least, OBCDC will stay within the ownership chain until a project is completed to the exact terms in which we specify. But there is a not unreasonable world in which we stay in the ownership chain well beyond that. So that could be That could be a joint venture with a developer. That could be a three-way joint venture between the developer and the church and us. There's a lot of things. I would imagine that Harlan and his congregation would want to maintain ownership of their building, the land that sits underneath it, their land and the parking lot. And there probably the rest of the building could be, these are a lot of details to work through, negotiated in some sort of a transfer or a lease for redevelopment.
Thank you. So I think it's important to maintain the ownership because, as you stated, the organization has come a very long way in terms of being able to do these complicated deals. So I think that's something we need to build upon. And whatever configuration we choose, whatever option we choose, I think there is an opportunity to, really transform this corner, but really also sustain the organization for many years to come through these types of arrangements. So I think that, that we're going down this road is very important, that we get the right tenant mix for whoever the tenants are. Getting the right tenant mix that blends with the neighborhood is going to be very important. That's why I think it's important for OBCDC to maintain the control over that going forward unless and until there is the perfect, eventual owner that will occupy the space. So thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. John?
Yes, have lived in Old Brooklyn for 12 years. I'm retired clergy now, have served in a variety of places. Church community is more important than church buildings, and having a church community in Old Brooklyn is important. And I'm United Methodist, and I would also say that I've always been humored by the sign out in front of St. Luke's. I don't know if it's still there, but it's God is still speaking, but it's not here anymore because this community closed. So I don't have allegiance to the building as much as allegiance to faith communities and faith communities being in our neighborhood.
Thanks, Sean. From a lesser person of faith than you, God still is speaking, if even not in that building. Any other questions? Debbie. Debbie, you're on mute. Okay, Debbie, we'll come back to you. Kate, do you want to go first?
Sure, I can go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. My question is, I know you mentioned at the beginning of the project that this Green Line purchase agreement happened very recently. And so what we were seeing was not sort of considering that, but I'm just wondering, if you and the staff have had conversations about, is there another option that would maybe sort of rise to the top, knowing what we now know? And I'm even thinking about, just the possibilities that opens up as far as, like you mentioned, access, but also, if, say, maybe only the Green Line building were to be demolished and something happened on that land to build on what else is on the property.
Yeah. Thank you, Kate. Unfortunately, as a historic preservationist, I love the Green Line building just as much. That's my sin of loving old buildings. But we have initiated that conversation, and that actually brought the fourth scenario that we originally didn't have. 3 weeks ago, we only had 3 scenarios that involved demolition of the St. Luke's Church as one scenario, connecting the 2 buildings with an elevator as one scenario, and then preserving the St. Luke's Church as a third scenario. So the acquisition of the Green Line property allowed us to open up that whole corner for that fourth scenario that keeps the church, but builds new construction elsewhere on the site. We'll evaluate that. So that's the fourth scenario that came in just within the last 3 weeks. Thanks for that question. Debbie, can we send it back to you now?
Yes, hopefully you can hear me. Okay, great. I'm not too good at all this computer stuff. And I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a realtor. I was born in Old Brooklyn, born at Deaconess Hospital, lived on Valley Road till I was 15. That neighborhood is just dear to my heart. And St. Luke's, I was baptized, I was confirmed, I was married there. Both of my children were baptized there. It's a beautiful building, just beautiful. And to second the motion, I wish they had never torn the Broadview Theater down. That ceiling in that building was beautiful. And I did not realize that the church was in such bad condition. You know, I drive past it every once in a while, but you can't tell anything by driving past it. And I get it, money is the issue. But that's just such a beautiful building. I'm just here to say, do what you can to keep that building, if you can. That's my vote. And it has nothing to do with anything, but how did they end up with two churches, one in front of the other? I mean, I always wondered, why are they right there? And why is it behind St. Luke's, or why?
Well,
I have a theory, Pastor Harlan here, just to say, I did notice that the cornerstone on the St. Luke's building is in German. So I'm going to wonder if perhaps early on they were worshiping in two different languages. But I can also say that as far as Pearl Road is concerned, you know, that was very much our sister church for so many years. I have parishioners at Pearl Road today who were St. Luke's people. And when we had a joint youth group, they married somebody from the other church and hopped over. After St. Luke's closed, their last pastor and a group of about 6 or 7 members met in our basement for the next several years to continue doing Bible study. My folks have memories of shared Thanksgiving services, shared Easter services. So, and you know, our connection to St. Luke's for sure goes back, and we loved actually having the UCC as an early conversation partner in all of this too, to hear what their dreams were for what could be done with their legacy here in Old Brooklyn. So that was good to hear.
And Debbie, thank you so much for all that and the really powerful stuff. Connie, I'm going to send it to you in 1 second. The reason why it appears there's one church in the front and one church in the back, Debbie, is because the church that's in the back is the old school building. There were two churches next to each other until a fire happened during the Great Depression. And temporarily, Pearl Road United Methodist Church moved into its school building behind St. Luke's, and they've just temporarily been there for 100 years.
Okay, thank you.
Connie?
Okay, and I'll add to your story. The reason that there was that car lot there, that picture that you had of the used cars, was that the church didn't pay their mortgage insurance. So when the church burnt down, they didn't have money to rebuild. So therefore they started holding services in the schoolhouse, or the school part of the building. If you dig under the grass where the playground is, the foundation of the original church was there. And the other thing is that church is Methodist, as we know, and St. Luke's was Congregational, two different types of religions, although they were next door to each other. Okay, and my question is, how do these changes affect the historic business district that we have?
Yeah, so I assume, Connie, what you're referring to is the South Brooklyn Historic District?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
so for those of you who don't know, kind of the historic part of our neighborhood, approximately from Henninger Road down to the Pearl Road split or so, is a registered historic district that allows buildings within that area to apply for state and federal tax credits. There is only one building within the district that is listed on the historic register, and that's the historic bank building at Pearl and Broadview, now the Ariel Pearl Center. That's the only individual building that's listed. All the other buildings are identified as contributing buildings to a historic district. And so Ethan and Adam from the architecture office actually did a fair amount of research into what the buildings that are there, the St. Luke's Church and the Green Line building, contribute to a district. And we will absolutely need to consult that, whether it's for tax credit purposes, whether it could impact the historic district. There's no kind of official ruling. There's no building that's listed on the register. So any changes that we'd want to do, we'd want to run by the historic, preservation offices that coordinate that.
Okay, thank you.
There's a question in the chat from Councilman Brancatelli about holding costs and liability. In the short term, our holding costs are pretty insignificant. It's mostly the investment that we've made to secure the building, because the building is being held by the county land bank until July of 2020. I'm sorry, until January of 2022. We don't have major holding costs until then. After that point, the taxes on the property are significant. The insurance on the property is significant. So our goal is within the next 12 months to put together a plan in place for the project, so that we don't start bearing those holding costs without any money coming in, because that's not ideal. So thank you, Tony. Yes, Debbie.
Debbie, unmute yourself. You need to unmute.
There we go. I just, before this ends or we change subjects or anything, I want to thank everyone that is keeping Old Brooklyn going, keeping it alive and just perfect. Thank you all. I know it's a lot of work.
Thanks, Debbie. I always say, there's the old saying in statistics is that good data in is good outcomes on the other side, or garbage in, garbage out. We are fortunate at Old Brooklyn CDC because we work with such a neighborhood that has great bones and great people and great love for it. So thank you to all of you for that. Question from Kate in the chat about additional feedback. So we are recording this meeting. This meeting and the presentation is going to go up on our website. We'll share that information through all the channels that we have, the Old Brooklyn News, social media, email, etc., which will include additional ways for folks to respond and give feedback. Obviously, when we seek approval from the city of Cleveland for the master plan, those are public meetings as well. And as we have throughout the process, anytime we have the ability to share updates with the community, we'll invite you all onto the Zoom and we'll have a good time doing it. So this is certainly not the last time you all will hear from us. Additionally, in the chat, a question from Rebecca Maurer about the capital campaign. Yes, so I actually haven't put any thought into that specifically, Rebecca. Obviously you would think local philanthropy would be interested at some level, but you'd probably have to do a fair amount of private fundraising. So in comparison, the $35 million that the Gordon Square Arts District raised as a part of their $100 million project in Gordon Square, I would guess probably, just off of what I know of the campaign, Tony might know differently, it was probably 1/3 public sources, 1/3 philanthropy, and 1/3 private donors. That's probably sounds about right. Tony, is that what you know? Okay, great. So yeah, we have good friends at the foundations. We don't have that good of friends at the foundations yet. And we have fantastic donors and private individuals who support us, many of which who are on the call. I don't know if any of you want to entertain the conversation about how to help us do this work, I would love to have that conversation. I don't know the sources yet, Rebecca. That's not something we pull off the shelf.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure it wasn't like already set in stone. But if anyone has $1 million lying around that they want to contribute, you know, put it into the pool.
Y'all know how to find me. One other thing that I want to say, because it has come up, and it's very important to Pastor Reif and to OBCDC and myself, is that if we look at housing options to complement the site, whether that be as a renovation project within PRUMC space, new construction on, in between the buildings, new construction, all those options, we're probably looking at a variety of kind of price points. We think that's very important to our mission as an organization that serves all members of the community. So this would not be a product that would only cater to like a luxury product. This would be a product that would likely have a mixture of market rate housing, affordable housing. Hopefully we could have some senior housing within the facility. We'd be looking at a variety of different options, which I think is reflective of Old Brooklyn and very important to us. Well, incredibly, it's 6:59, and I'm going to give it a last call for questions. And if not, I have one question to ask one person in the audience. Jordan, that's the Ben Franklin Community Garden behind you, is that correct?
That is correct, yep.
Nice. Is that your own drone shot, or where'd you get that picture from?
No, I had a drone buddy come out and he took some videos and all that type of stuff. So we're hoping to get a winter one if the snow actually sticks around out there. So he's trying to get all 4 seasons. So that'd be pretty awesome.
Oh, that's awesome. Awesome. For those of you who don't know Jordan, he's like a few other folks on this call, a very active member of the Ben Franklin Community Garden. Looks like 2 more questions. Jamie, you had one, and Greg, you had one.
I was just going to mention that Jordan is our mapping hero. He does all the mapping for our housing studies every year.
We like friends who know GIS. Greg asked for a question or an update on Brighton Park. So Brighton Park is completed except for the trees and the landscaping. The Ohio EPA has a lot of opinions on what trees we can plant on the site and what trees we can't plant on the site, based off of nativeness and climate and what's in the ground and what it puts in the air. And so thankfully, I don't have to do a lot of that, but our partners at the Western Reserve Land Conservancy are spending days and days discussing tree species plantings at the park. So for those of you who haven't been out there, it's a super awesome trail. Kudos to the folks who've been working on that project for 20 years. I can't wait to come back in 20 years when those trees are all grown that we're going to be planting in the spring. If you go up to the overlook, don't fall into the ravine. There's no fence there yet. Tony, I've watched you get too close to the edge. Don't do it. But be safe and get out there. It's a great trail. So.
And the other last piece on there, Jeff, is the signage. So there's a whole signage package that's going in and going through the design process, and that will be very helpful as we start getting more and more visitors going there.
Yeah, one of the things that Connie, I know this is turning into social hour, everybody, so I'm sorry, but Connie, one of the things that I'd like to talk with you about, and Greg a little too with Big Creek, but I think more so with the Historical Society, is there any sort of is there a historical trail or any sort of documentation we want to put on the site for folks going through it to learn a little bit more about the history of the neighborhood? That's just something we should talk about separately.
Okay. There's nothing yet, but we could create something.
All right, hearing nothing else. Oh, Tony, we go. Is that goodbye or you? Okay, Tony's done. Hearing nothing else, I sincerely thank all of you. This rang true and rang resonant with what I believe most folks desire and hope and pray for at this corner in this neighborhood, and I am grateful for your participation. You will hear more, I promise you. I hope you'll come back next time. I will try to be even more entertaining. So thank you and have a good night, everybody.